is Ship, and today we're going to make trail bites. And trail bites are like a fun peanut butter cookie that you don't have to bake in the oven. And you can follow along with me and cook along, or you can learn how to do it now and make it another time. So we're going to be using peanut butter or other kinds of nut butters, and those fall into protein, right? And we've got some nuts, and that's also a protein. Oats, and what food group do oats go into? Greens, great. And we're gonna add some dried fruit. So we could use some raisins or some cranberries, and those of course, well, I just said it, those go into fruit. So that's a 3 food group snack. We have a couple of other ingredients too. I'm gonna use some coconut flakes, but you can also use some mini chocolate chips. Well, coconut flakes go into nuts and protein, and chocolate chips, that's a sometimes food, right? We have another sometimes food we're adding. Just a little bit of honey, and that's to help us stick it all together. So what else do we need to make this recipe? We need a bowl for mixing. We can use some measuring spoons and cups. If you don't have them, that's fine, we can just estimate. A spoon for stirring, and a spatula is helpful to scoop it all out. A plate to put them on. And then for our nuts, we need to crush them into small pieces. And one great way we can do that is with a heavy can, and that's it. The first thing we have to do is wash our hands. So we're going to get our hands wet, grab soap, suds up, and wash for the time it takes to sing happy birthday twice, and then rinse. The second thing we have to do is wash our fruits and vegetables. Your recipe is a pretty big recipe. It makes a lot of trail bites, and today we're going to make half a recipe. So this is good because it gives us a chance to practice some math. Math is so helpful when you're cooking. And we get to use some fractions today. So we're going to divide all of the measurements in the recipe in half. So for a cup of oats, we're actually going to use how much? A half a cup, yes. If you don't have measuring cups, that's okay, we can use some estimation skills. You can use about a half a cup. This recipe doesn't have to be exact. Now we're going to add the peanut butter or nut butter. And our recipe is for 3/4 cup. So 3/4 is a half plus a quarter. Well, how are we going to divide that in half? Half of 3/4 is 3/8, but that is still kind of tricky. But if we divide the half in half, we get a quarter. And then if we divide the quarter in half, the quarter of the 3/4 in half, we get an eighth. And an eighth is half of one of these. We also know that there are 4 tablespoons in a 1/4 cup. So an eighth would be 2 tablespoons. So how about we do a 1/4 cup plus 2 tablespoons of nut butter. So we divided our 3/4 cup into a half plus a quarter, and now we're going to divide each of those in half. So that would be a quarter plus an eighth, and an eighth is the same as 2 tablespoons. I'm going to use a mixture of peanut butter, sunflower seed butter, and some sesame seed butter called tahini. What kind of nut butters will you use? Now our recipe says half a cup of nuts. This is a half cup. Half of a half cup is a 1/4 cup, right? I have pecans here. You could use any kind of nut. These nuts have to be crushed into smaller pieces for our recipe, so they're not too big. So you could always cut them up with a knife. It might be better to crush them up a little bit. You could use a kitchen mallet to crush them. You could put them in a mortar and pestle, or you could just crush them with a heavy can like this. Make sure you wash the bottom off first. That worked really well. Next up is our dried fruit, and the recipe was for a 1/4 cup, but we want half of that. So that would be an eighth of a cup. And we know that there are 4 tablespoons in a 1/4 cup. 1, 2, 3, 4. So we could just use 2 tablespoons of dried fruit. If you don't have a measuring spoon, just use your bigger spoon from the spoon drawer. I don't have quite enough raisins and cranberries, so I'm going to use a couple of apricots. I'll have to chop them up. It says about a pinch of coconut or chocolate chips. I'm going to add a couple of tablespoons of coconut. Then a tablespoon of honey. You could use something else sticky too, like maybe some maple syrup or agave syrup. We're going to have to divide that in half. We could add half a tablespoon, but we also know that there are 3 teaspoons in a tablespoon. And what is 3 divided in half? That's 1.5. Let's use 1.5 teaspoons of honey. Now we have all our ingredients in the bowl. We're going to take a spoon and stir it around. It's kind of hard at first. We could actually add some other fun ingredients if we wanted to. What about a sprinkle of cinnamon? Or a little tiny drop of vanilla? Do you mind getting your hands messy when you cook? This cookie dough works out better if you can stir it with your hands. If you don't want to do that, you can keep stirring it with a spoon. But you can knead it up like it's bread dough, and that will really get the ingredients mixed together. Try squeezing yours together. Is it sticking together okay? If it's too dry and it's crumbly, then you can add a little more of your nut butter. And if it's very gooey, you can add a little bit more oats. All right, now it's time to start making our trail bite balls. So grab a small handful, and it doesn't matter what size you make these. They can be big or small, and kind of squish the ingredients together. And then you just roll them gently in the palm of your hand. Don't push too hard or they could crumble and fall apart. I wonder what other ingredients would be fun to add to these. What about breakfast cereal? You could take your cereal flakes and grind them up with a can like we did with your nuts and add those instead of the oats. You could add lots of kinds of dried fruit. What about dried blueberries or dried cherries? You can make these without the nuts if you don't want nuts in them. You could add wheat germ or flaxseed to make them even extra healthy. You could roll them in cocoa powder. So you can try these trail bites today for snack, and then you'll probably have a lot left over. And you can keep them in the fridge for a couple of weeks and grab one each day for snack for a treat. There we go, our trail bites are all done. Why don't you take some time away from your computer and have your healthy snack, and I hope you get to try these trail bites sometime. See you next time.